There are some moments in history that just feel huge, like a single point where everything changes direction. And the Battle of Tours in 732 AD, it's always been one of those moments. The story we all hear is that this one legendary battle saved all of Western Europe. But was it really that simple? Let's dig in and really unpack the story behind the legend.
Listen to this. The great 18th century historian Edward Gibbon, he certainly thought it was a big deal. This quote, it just perfectly captures that traditional high-stakes view of the battle, right? A total clash of civilizations, where the entire future of Christendom was hanging by a thread. It frames the fight as this absolute do-or-die turning point. And that's really the key concept we're talking about here, a watershed event. For centuries, this is exactly how people saw the Battle of Tours, as this crystal-clear, definitive line drawn in the sand of history. One side won, one side lost, and boom, the world was never the same. But as we're about to see, history is almost never that neat and tidy.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with that classic story of a watershed moment and the incredible, seemingly unstoppable expansion that led up to it. Then we'll throw a wrench in the works and talk about a surprising obstacle, nature itself. After that, we'll dive right into the battle tactics, look at the modern debate over how important it really was, and finally, uncover what might be the battle's true and maybe even more interesting legacy.
So let's start with the legend itself. This idea that one battle on one day saved an entire continent. This is the story that's been told for over 1,000 years, but to really get it, we have to look at what set the stage for this dramatic moment.
To really understand the legend, you have to appreciate the context. The 100 years before Tours saw this absolutely breathtaking expansion of the Umayyad Caliphate. We're talking about a vast Islamic empire stretching from Spain all the way to India. It was a military and religious force unlike anything the world had ever seen, and honestly, it looked like nothing could get in its way. Now, just look at the sheer speed of all this. It's incredible. In just 1 century, a movement that started in the Arabian Peninsula goes on to conquer the entire Persian Empire, sweep across all of North Africa, and take control of Spain. By 732, the Umayyad Caliphate was actually bigger than the old Roman Empire at its height. And its armies were now crossing the Pyrenees Mountains into the heartland of the Franks. From the outside, it must have looked absolutely positively unstoppable. But that whole story of unstoppable momentum, it kind of hits a snag when you look a little bit closer. Because before the Umayyads ever met the Franks in battle, they had to face a much older, much more stubborn opponent. Nature itself. Yep, the very ground they were trying to conquer played a huge role in their campaign. And this number right here is so important. 70 years. Let that sink in. That's how long it took them to subdue just one region, the Maghreb in North Africa. This was no quick and easy conquest like Persia. The super rugged terrain gave the local Berber populations a massive defensive advantage, which just goes to show you the Caliphate's advance was anything but a simple steamroll. And this illustrates so well how nature could be both an enemy and a friend to them. The same mountains that fueled Berber resistance for decades also offered these perfect, defensible locations for new Muslim cities. And, get this, in one case, the sea tide randomly receded, allowing for a total surprise attack that captured the city of Tripoli. So you see, nature wasn't just some passive backdrop. It was an active player, shaping the entire conflict. Okay, so let's finally move to the battle itself. When the Umayyad army finally meets the Franks near the city of Tours, it sets the stage for this fascinating clash of military styles, led by 2 really formidable commanders. All right, so on one side, you've got Charles Martel and his Franks. Their strength was their super disciplined, heavy infantry. We're talking tough guys fighting on foot. And in the other corner, you have Abd Al-Rahman leading a force famous for its absolutely devastating heavy cavalry. But, and this is a big but, they had a potential weakness. They were carrying tons of plunder from sacking cities on their way, and that could slow them down and become a huge distraction. This is where Charles Martel proved he was a military genius. First, he chose the battlefield, a high, wooded slope, totally perfect for messing up a cavalry charge. Smart. Second, he formed his infantry into this dense square, a phalanx that one writer at the time described as a bulwark of ice. Can we picture it? They just stood there, absorbing charge after charge without breaking. Then came the turning point. A rumor, maybe started by Frankish scouts, who knows, spreads that the Umayyad camp and all that treasure was being attacked. Some of the cavalry peel off to protect their loot.
The rest of the army thinks it's a retreat, and bam, total chaos. Abd al-Rahman was actually killed trying to rally his men. So, a decisive victory for the Franks. Case closed, the West is saved, right? Well, not exactly. In the last century or so, a lot of historians have started to question that traditional watershed story, and it's led to a really fascinating debate. And this question right here is really at the heart of the whole modern debate. Was the Umayyad army a full-scale invasion force trying to conquer all of Europe, like Gibbon believed? Or was it something else entirely? A really big but ultimately limited raiding party that was just focused on looting wealthy monasteries? The answer to that question changes everything about how important this battle was. So this table really lays out the two arguments side by side. On the one hand, you have the traditional view. It was a full-scale invasion, it was stopped cold, and it saved Christendom. Simple. But the revisionist view completely flips that script. They argue no, it was just a raid, not an invasion. That the battle itself was a pretty minor skirmish, so minor that Arab historians at the time barely even mention it. And that the real reason the Umayyads stopped expanding wasn't this one defeat, but massive internal problems, like the Great Berber Revolt that were basically tearing their empire apart from the inside. And check this out. This is a key piece of evidence for the revisionist argument. If Tours was such a final, decisive blow, then why did a major city like Narbonne, deep inside Frankish territory, stay a Muslim stronghold for another 27 years? It really suggests that the conflict was more of a long, grinding war of attrition, not something that was decided in a single afternoon. So, where does all this leave us? If the battle didn't really save the world, does that mean it wasn't important? Not at all. Its most significant, most undeniable impact wasn't on the grand stage of global history, but on the future of the Franks themselves.
The undisputed, hands-down winner of the Battle of Tours was Charles Martel. The victory earned him his famous nickname, the Hammer, and it cemented his reputation as the most powerful man in the kingdom. He used that prestige to crush his rivals, secure his borders, and basically end the old line of Merovingian kings. He laid the political and military groundwork for his own family, the Carolingians, to take over, which of course paved the way for his legendary grandson, Charlemagne, to build a whole new Western empire.
I think this quote from historian Paul Aitchison just sums up the modern thinking perfectly. Yes, it was a victory, and a really important one, for the Franks. But it just wasn't the epic, world-altering event that legend has made it out to be. Its true importance was dynastic, not civilizational. And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The story of Tours as the battle that saved Europe was written and glorified by the winners and their descendants for centuries. And it's a powerful story. But it also shows us that history isn't set in stone. It's constantly being re-examined, questioned, and understood in new ways, challenging us to look past the really cool myths to find a much more complex and maybe more interesting truth.